Good evening and welcome back to our Fridays After 5 presented by Chase Dance After Work program. Tonight, celebrating Juneteenth with a deeper look into what the day means, what the celebration means, and where it comes from. We welcome Iya Osunponmile to the program to discuss African spirituality and Juneteenth and the use of the body in worship as we go forward. Miss Iya Osunponmile, welcome to the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into our conversation, would you take just a moment to tell the audience a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Well, again, my name is Iya Osunponmile. My full name as a priest in Ifa, which is an African spiritual system, is Iya Ifa Shola Osunponmile Alake Ogunjafumi Fahimi Akambi.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was initiated in Abeokuta, Nigeria, Ogun State, as a priest of Ifa, as a priest of Oshun, and as a priest of Ogun. And one of my big things that I really hold dear to my heart as a priest is ancestral reverence, and retaining our African culture and kind of that concept of Sankofa, reaching back and getting what our ancestors left us to be able to do the work and to decolonize the mind and how we think about African spirituality and even ancestral reverence.
Decolonize the mind. That gave me chills. I've never thought of the concept of the mind itself being residually colonized. That's fascinating. So tell me about the central practice of faith that you follow, this idea of African spirituality. Where does it come from and how do you engage with it?
So the spiritual system that I practice comes from West Africa, Nigeria, specifically Yoruba land. It is a nature-based African spiritual system, because the concept is that God is in everything. God is so vast, right, that we can't conceptualize the fullness of God. So God has different, it's almost like going to the mall. You go to the mall to go buy clothes, you're going to go to one store to get shoes, you're going to go here to get this. So within African spirituality, you have Orisha or Loa or Abasum, and they represent forces in nature. But all of these things together, even including us, encapsulates God in its totality, because we believe that we're a piece of God having a human experience here on this earth. So it's about connecting with nature, it's about connecting with ancestors, it's about connecting with our sisters and brothers. It's really about community.
That's beautiful. I'm interested in what is the figure, how do you describe the figure of God in this spiritual system?
God is considered Olodumare. That is the divine being. That is everything that we come from. Then Olodumare has Orishas that represents different aspects. So I'm a priest of Oshun. Oshun deals with fresh water, it deals with the river. On a physical and a healing, she deals with love. Oshun really is God's love. Um, she deals with self-love, self-reflection. If you think about the river, it always finds the path of least resistance. So as a priest of Oshun, it's about me going with the flow, being flexible, always for the path of least resistance. And, I have control issues. So about giving up that control and just going with the flow. So these spiritual systems, they're very ethereal, but then they're also very, very practical as well. It's not magic, but they can be magical in a sense.
I imagine the experience that one takes with them can feel magical. You mentioned that your focus on in your priesthood is the river and water. How do the other elements factor into this spiritual system?
Well, they all go together. If you think about it, water is life-giving. Nothing can survive without water. And it's actually a story of Oshun, where when initially all of the Arumale or all of the original deities that came to establish the earth, it was all men. She was the one woman. And, they're like, okay, well, you can go sit over here. We're going to handle the heavy lifting. And they never wanted Oshun's assistance. So she kind of went off on her own. And they were trying to figure out why nothing was working. And that's because Oshun left. And that was the fresh water. So certain cities couldn't forge iron. They couldn't, have crops to grow. They couldn't do anything without water. So water is important. It's life-giving. So, and we use it a lot in our work that we do. It's called Only Tutu, cool water. It cools energy. It heals the body. It nourishes the body. So it's very necessary.
Now, in most religions that I have discovered, there's a manuscript or text that I've read. In studying African spiritual systems, are there texts that exist similar to a Bible or a Torah, or are these oral traditions, ancestral traditions passed down the way we know that particular people, indigenous people and African peoples teach their children?
So African spiritual systems are basically oral, but in this new world, this new time, of course, now we have books that have information about it, or the holy text, which are called Odoo, which encapsulates the energy of Olodumare, of the Orishas, of the human experience. So I don't want to compare it to a Bible, but there are various books with holy text in it, because there are 256 of these Odoo. And then there are 256 stories with each Odoo, and it continues to grow as we grow, and the stories get added on to. So it is very much oral, but in today's society, we are starting to write that down, and there are books that you can get. But to say that there's like one ancient book like a Bible or Torah, no, we do not have that, because it was all oral. You sat at the feet of your elders, and that's how you got the information. And we still will do that, but of course we have books because we work 9-to-5 jobs and all of that. So, but if you were to go to Yoruba land, you would see little boys, little girls starting off young, like 3 or 4, and they start learning the traditions and how to recite verses. And it's just really a beautiful tradition.
I love it. You know what I'm going to take away from this? That text, that Bible that maybe doesn't exist, is written in our DNA. We are the text ourselves. That's what I'm going to take away from that. It's gorgeous. It reminds me of being a child sitting at my mother's feet and learning lessons, whatever they may be. Now, how do these spiritual systems leave Africa and find their way to America and here in Virginia?
So, of course, during the transatlantic slave trade, when those Africans were brought to the Caribbean and to, Brazil, the Americas, they brought pieces of their spirituality with them. Now, of course, if you're going to, someone who's going to bring slaves over, you're not going to bring older people, you're going to bring younger people. So they may not have had their full training, and they're trying to remember things and, kind of piece things together. So that's how the spiritual systems came out of Africa. So with Ifa, it originally went into places like Cuba, Puerto Rico. It went into Brazil, but it became Lucami or Santeria, or Regla de Ocha. It became Candomblé, Umbanda, Voodoo. Everyone associates Voodoo with Haiti, but Voodoo comes from Benin, Togo area. And it was those Africans that came out of Benin, Togo, that went into Haiti and other places. And that's how we get Haitian Voodoo. So it was really a retention. In the United States, it showed up as hoodoo for African American. And a lot of people, they're like, oh, hoodoo, but hoodoo is it's a culture. It's not a thing. It's not just the ritual and spiritual practice, but it's ancestral reverence. A lot of things in the Black church is hoodoo. People don't even know it. People catching the Holy Spirit. That's ancestral. They're being mounted by ancestors. The rhythm, the drums, the singing, the cadence, the dancing, the ring shout, all of that is retention from what we brought over from Africa.
Mm.
Now, probably starting around the 60s, Ifa became a bigger tradition for African Americans. You have Oyatunji Village in South Carolina that came about. You had African Americans in New York that were getting back into the tradition, up until now, where we've now made connections back with the continent. And so a lot of us go back to Nigeria to be initiated into these traditions. So that's kind of the time frame of how things happen.
I want to do something uncharacteristic and something I completely hadn't planned, but you just taught me something about my own self. My father is from Haiti,
Mhm.
and I don't know very much about his family. Was Catholic, and so but with practices of voodoo as well. And I'm interested to know how, if you know, how these spiritual practices leave Africa and wind up in a place like Haiti and perhaps evolve into something else. Because they're interacting with a new culture and maybe absorbing some of it.
And definitely happens. So in Haiti and a lot of places, depending on what house you're with, I know like um, Voodoo in New Orleans, you have to be Catholic to be part of it because
Mm.
part of the retention and for us to be able to keep our traditions, which is why you have Santeria. You would hide or synchronize the Orisha with the saints. So you have Shango is an Orisha. He
Okay.
would be synchronized with Saint Barbara because they kind of take on the same energy. They kind of
Hmm.
have the same purpose. So being Catholic in Haiti, there probably was still some type of, voodoo or reverence to the Loa
For
because they
sure.
also synchronize the Loa with Catholic saints to be able to hold on to it because our ancestors would be killed or beaten for practicing their traditions. So they had to find a way to kind of go underground. And that's why why it's closed religion. And it's such a thing with gatekeeping. Like
Hmm.
you have to go through initiation. There's certain things that I can't tell you about Ifa, about Oshun, about any of the other Orisha, because it's considered awo, it's secrecy. And
Mm.
it's because it's sacred, but also because of how it was a death sentence for us to practice our ancestral traditions. Even when the colonizers first went into Africa, they saw the power that we had, specifically the women.
Mm.
And it's noted where they were told to break their pots and things of that nature. So a lot of things went underground. So
Wow.
different elements have changed things, but really not that much. I'm seeing where we're getting back to practicing it. Now we have to take into consideration our experience. As African Americans, we're not going to practice exactly the way they do in Nigeria because we have a different experience.
Right.
They start off young. I got initiated at 34. There's no way, I'm not going to say there's no way, but to remember verses in English and Yoruba no, I still need books. I still need to reference things. And, and I feel like with African Americans, ancestral reverence in Ifa and in African spiritual systems is such a big thing because they're the shoulders that we stand on.
Right.
We're the sum total of those that came before us. So we want to honor their sacrifices. We want to honor the traumas that they went through in order for us to just be here. It's like that meme or that t-shirt, I'm my ancestors' wildest dream.
Yeah.
Because I have to think that somewhere down the line, my great great grandmother knew that there were going to be more,
Yeah.
right? And she was I'm gonna dig in and do what I got to do and survive so it can be better. They always had hope, which kept them going. So that's what a lot of us rest on in African spiritual systems and why we do what we do.
That is a beautiful thing. I'm interested. You bring up the point that traditionally these children would begin learning at 3 years old. You yourself didn't begin or didn't get initiated until 34 years old.
Mhm.
Beyond the decades of missed education on this subject, how does the African American experience with this spiritual system differ from the experience one might have if they're learning it in Yoruba?
I mean, of course, it's different because one, we don't speak Yoruba. So the Yoruba language is a very tonal language, and there are certain words that that really have no translation in English. So having
Mm.
to learn the language is like a learning curve, even just to be able to pronounce certain things, right? Um, the dedication to having to study a little bit more. Like I'm always studying, I always have a book with me, taking classes, traveling different places. We have to get on the learning curve. Like I said, am I going to know everything about Ifa in my lifetime? No, but I believe that my ancestors in spirit are going to give me what I need and what I need to share with the world. And I think a lot of African Americans just take that approach with I'm a study, I'm a travel back to Nigeria or these other places where, like, I've been to Brazil to study, I've been to Cuba to study,
Oh,
Mexico. I'm hoping to get to Haiti soon. And I'm actually going to Ghana, just to study, not necessarily Ifa, but just about ancestral traditions. So it's just about getting out there and studying and networking and meeting people and sitting at the feet of the elders that we still have here today.
you know how they say somebody's ears must be burning because you're talking about him. My dad is blowing up my phone right now. I don't know what he wants, but I was just talking about his Haitian roots and how that blood poured into me. I'll have to call him back later. Now, as you're studying or worshiping or engaging in this African spiritual system with yourself and with those who celebrate and worship with you, is there a location that's important to you all, or is nature itself its location? Is there a church, or how do you do this?
So the houses are called Elays, but that is not necessarily the physical building. It
Mm.
is the community of priests of adherence to the tradition. Some places do have an actual temple or house. Right now, we have a big headquarters that's based out of Houston, Texas. That's where I am now. We're actually doing Ifa Festival and some Juneteenth celebration. So yeah, we do have a big compound here where we have, our shrine room. We have the places where we do work. We have the places where we get together, as priests and talk about different things about the tradition. So it just differs
Mm.
from house to house or Elay to Elay. For me, when I work with, my clients and my godchildren, I usually take them out into nature when we do stuff. So if
Mm.
you need to leave an offering for the ancestors, we're going to go out into nature and find a tree because the tree represents the roots. It
Mm.
represents the support. That's why people use family trees because it's all about that ancestral connection. And also when our ancestors couldn't set up shrines like we had, so they would go into nature and go to trees. So really the whole earth is sacred and it's an Elay and a spiritual house in itself.
Man, I have things I need to learn from you. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to learn more about this. You bring up Juneteenth at a very timely point in our conversation and in the year, as it is today, June 18th. Juneteenth will be tomorrow on the 19th. Let's start at the beginning. What is Juneteenth? Why is it significant?
Juneteenth is significant. Historically, it commemorates the end of slavery, specifically for those enslaved African Americans that were in Galveston, Texas. It was on um, June 19th, 1865, when they were finally notified that, hey, the Emancipation Proclamation was read, you
Mhm.
all are free. And that marked the day where they celebrated um, their freedom, that, okay, this life is over. It's hope for a new life for me, for my children, for those that come after me. Um, Juneteenth has become so much more
Yeah.
because it's just an overall honoring of the ancestors, of those people who came before us, and honoring what they endured just so we could be here.
Mm. That's beautiful. And we celebrate it now, even today, as history rolls on. Um, we learn that there are small pockets here and there where slaves still have not yet been freed or known that they're freed after this June 19th date, but very few. And then the celebrations, as I study, as I understand, pick up with
Mhm.
food and with ritual and with dance. And sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month. I believe you
Mhm.
celebrate for a month. I think about the 60s, the civil rights movement comes, and Juneteenth doesn't lose value or importance, but maybe is clouded by the rest of the activity going on. And then the 1970s come and Juneteenth becomes more prominent again. Here in 2021, how do we engage with Juneteenth and how do we celebrate and remember what it means?
Juneteenth is definitely important. You know, it was about freedom, it was about celebration. And if you look at African Americans, you know, we are still in this fight for racial equality. Juneteenth has been made a federal holiday, but we can't even really teach, honestly, why we even need to celebrate Juneteenth.
Just
You
became a
know,
holiday
there's
yesterday.
no right. No, so we can't even talk about racial equity. We can't even talk about, we can't use 1619 project and curriculums in school. So it's like you made it a federal holiday, but we really do need to talk about why it needs to be a holiday, why it is a thing. Let's talk about slavery in a very real way. Slavery, Jim
Mhm,
Crow. Let's
mhm.
talk about civil rights era. Like all of those things are important. And it definitely ties into Juneteenth because it still goes on about the rights of African Americans when we look at, you know, inequalities in communities of African American and school systems. If we look at the criminal justice system, if
Mhm.
we look at what has been happening with, you know, police brutality, all of these things are still a fight. And still, we should use this Juneteenth to continue and as a spark so we can keep going and we can have more celebrations about us coming together and being equal and the systemic racism and the institutionalized racism that's this moving beyond that so we can truly have the equality.
You raise a very important point to me that's very dear, and it's that of education. I I don't recall. I was just thinking now. I can't recall a single lesson in school that taught me any of this. Yeah, I had to learn it on my own later in life than I would like to have learned about it. Uh, to incorporate these things into schools and these things into education, what do you think it might take to really teach these lessons?
I honestly, it's going to take a reckoning. Some people don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable for them. But my thing is, it was uncomfortable for my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
It was uncomfortable for the ancestors that had to endure it. And we're really not going to move forward until we can have an honest conversation about really what the long term effects are of slavery, because it's really not that far gone. You know, my mother and father um, would tell me stories about how they would ride home and they would be having these big KKK conventions and they would stop cars and look in them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, my parents are 74 and 79. So we're not that far removed from inequalities and those types of things, like the big ones that everyone thinks about. A lot of people think just because we've gone through segregation that, okay, everything is fine. No, we really need to talk about things. There needs to be an education in school. And I feel like there just needs to be an overall education in the United States. We have to have a reckoning. And I feel
It,
like when we can be honest, then we can move forward with having substantial educational programs and things of that nature.
you're right when you say that it is hard and that it is uncomfortable. Right now at VMFA, we have a special exhibition, Dirty South. You can glean from its title what it talks about. But as a part of that special exhibition is a satellite room that you don't have to pay to get into. This part of the exhibition is free. And it's an installation that we own now called Storm in Time of Shelter by Paul
Mhm.
Rucker. Are you familiar with the work?
Yes, I've heard of it. Mhm.
Series of clan robes that he himself made. A black man with its own encounters with the clan
Right.
decided he needed to learn more about it and studied. And he did a TED talk. I encourage everyone who's watching to go and view it, come to the museum, take in the exhibition. But he talks about how he was searching for clan robes, usable clan robes, and he couldn't find a single one. And so he decided he'd make them, and they're very bright and they're very colorful. They are the shape of the robe, but it might be something reminiscent of kente cloth or camo or just a bright red. And as you walk into the space, these figures are bigger than everyone. They're meant to feel intimidating. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to tour that gallery with someone who was here, a dancer. And when she didn't know where we were going, and when she first saw from a distance what was in that room, she stopped and she said, "Wait a minute, what are you doing to me? Where are you taking me? What are we doing?" And I told her, "No, we're going in here. And it is going to be heavy. It's going to be deep and dark as a pit. But just like I had to learn it, everyone's got to learn it. It's heavy and it's hard, but that real education has got to happen." There are too many people who just don't know.
Yeah, and most definitely. And in the meantime, a lot of people want to discredit the arts, but art, like I said earlier, is ritual, whether if it's dance, it's ritual in motion, but it's through arts that really an education happens. Because if you think about it, film, books, plays, music, all of those things will sometimes inspire a person to go look more into something. I think about as a kid watching Roots. That was my first, look into, and I couldn't even finish it because it made me sad. It made me angry. I've never finished Roots. I don't think I've made it past maybe the second.
You're not alone.
Second part of it. So, the arts are very important in education, and that's something that can be outside of, the classroom to help people understand what has happened. So I'm excited that the Virginia Fine Arts Museum is doing this. And, I lived in Richmond for a while, so I would always go when they had the Kende Wiley, the Gordon Parks, like all of those exhibits. I make sure, and it's on my list to come up there in the next couple of weeks to see the exhibit that you just spoke about.
When you do, you make sure you let me know so I can get you a ticket. You make sure you let me know you're coming up. I want to learn more about you. We've learned about you as a priest. We've learned about you as a historian. I want to learn about you as an artist. Tell me about your creative process.
So my creative process, I like to create with my hands. So I started making jewelry, a few years back. That kind of morphed into me beading. So in African spiritual system, Ifa, beading is an important thing. You'll see a lot of the crowns and the headpieces. I did not make this particular one, but beading, these types, they're called ilekes. So they represent Ifa. We have some that represent Orisha. For me, that's an art. And so it helps relax me. So I bead, I make waist beads. I do want to get back to painting. And I'm developing this thing of being a griot now, which is an artist in itself. So, as I go, as spirit leads me, as I get more comfortable in who I am, I open up and I become more, creative in all the things that I do. But definitely right now, beading and retaining the oral tradition of our ancestors is really big to me.
Now, we have spent, rightfully so, time speaking about African spiritual systems, about Juneteenth, about nature, and about yourself. But we're here on a dance program. So I'm wanting to learn from you the importance and the impact that the body has as you're worshiping, as you're engaging with nature.
The body is important because the body is its own temple. And it's funny, actually on Juneteenth, we're having what's called the Bimbe, which is a drumming for the Orishas. And we go to honor the Orishas with actual offerings that we take, but also with our body through dance, through song. There's certain dances for each Orisha that will encapsulate their energy. So for example, the Orisha Eshu opens the way. So whenever we do a bembe, we always start with Eshu. And a lot of his dances are the movements of opening the way and clearing things out to make space for spirit to come down, to open up the way so that the medicine and the healing can come down, because the dance is healing for the body. There have been times where I have just felt, I don't want to be here, I'm feeling bad, and I'll turn on music and I'll just dance for the Orisha, and it charges me up. It's a healing. So the body is very important in African spiritual systems. Even if you look at our ancestors, when they had time off, what did? They got together and they danced, because it's that connection, it's that energy flowing. So dance is very healing. It's a very big part. And also using our voices to sing songs for the Orisha as well.
Now the songs. We're in a dance program, but we dance to music. What sorts of songs are you singing? Where do they come from?
So they come from Yoruba land. A lot of the words are, everything we sing is in Yoruba. Now, the interesting part of this is because of how the traditions made it into the United States or came over into the Caribbean. As I spoke earlier, a lot of things came from Cuba. Cuba, Santeria, Lukumi, they really did a really good job of retaining a lot of the culture. And that was a lot of African Americans' first experience. So they do have a lot of songs that they sing, of course, because of the language, the Spanish. It's not perfect Yoruba, but a lot of us will sing those songs. And those songs are prayers. They're called Orin Orisha. So they're prayers. We're calling on Orisha. They're specific songs for specific things. They're songs that we can sing for ancestors, and everything is a prayer. Everything is to raise up that energy and that vibration. So it's really like a medicine. The songs and the dance together is a medicine to heal, to come forward and heal the community. So it's very important in everything we do. Even if you look at the Black church, the music is majority of it. Think about when people, catch the spirit, the clapping, the dancing, the drums, all of that.
You're not wrong. That call and response that we see in Black music in America is a direct result of call and response we maintain from our African tradition. I'm interested to learn a little bit deeper about how music and dance work in tandem for these celebrations or ceremonies. They're welcoming in ancestors' spirits, or how are they as impactful as they are?
So we have specific songs for each Orisha. Then we have specific songs for ancestors. So for me, let's say I go do an offering for Oshun, or I decide to go to the river or to my shrine or wherever I go. I can sing a song for her. One of the songs that I love to sing for Oshun is Ide were were ita Oshun, Ide were were. Ide were were ita Oshun, Ide were were ita Iya, Ochakini wa ita Oshun. So that song talks about Oshun being my mother of the sweet river. It's about calling Oshun with the brass bangles. It's about inviting her into my space. And me as an adherent and as a priest of Oshun, when I sing, even in that little thing, I felt the energy shift for me. So it calls them in to come down and do the work that we need for them to do for us, or for our clients, or for the community, or whatever we're doing. So it is very important. Everything we do is a ritual. Even if it looks simple, it's a ritual. It has a purpose. Every dance move that we do is a ritual. So we have the deity Yemoja. She is a river deity, but in the diaspora, she has been associated with the top of the ocean. It's said that she came out of Nigeria or out of Africa with the slave ships to make sure that her children made it where they needed to go safely. So a lot of the dances that they do are the skirts that represents the wave and the energy of Yemoja. Even some of the dance moves get a little bit more erratic because of the rough, choppy waters. You
Uh-huh.
know, she's oftentimes associated with the duck, which deals with mothering and nurturing. If you see how ducks take care of their children. So there's dance moves that we do that mimic the duck because it's mimicking the energy that these orishas encapsulate. So when we're doing that, we're calling them down. And some people will get mounted by orisha during these times when they're singing and they're dancing. And the orisha will come down to give their medicine, to give messages to the community. And that's really when we have a lot of these drummings like bimbes or tambours or drum circles. Like that's what these things are for. It's to call down the different energies, the spirits of the lands, the orishas, or even ancestors.
I love how you point out that every small part of it is ritual. You mentioned just in passing the brass bangles,
Mhm.
calling the help and the medicine to you. If you're somebody like myself who's
Mhm.
interested in beginning their journey down learning about more about African spiritual systems, what would your advice be? How can I get started becoming more like you?
I would definitely tell you to find a priest or someone in the tradition to help you because there's a lot of information out there
Mhm.
on the internet. Some is right, some is wrong. But again, this is an oral tradition. It's not meant for someone to just read a book and study. So finding a spiritual house near you. For me, I asked my ancestors, can you please point me, bring the people that's going to teach me about these traditions? And literally 2 weeks later, I met my godfather and my nail godmother. So I even did that. But we have a house in Richmond. There's several other elays, reputable elays, good priests, good people that are really looking to help bring back and retain our ancestral traditions through African spirituality, through dance, through storytelling, through all of these different mediums. So definitely just getting with someone, another priest or someone in the tradition that can help point you in the right direction.
What is it that caused you to begin your journey down this path?
My journey started when I was young. I was had questions. I went to church. I grew up in the Baptist church.
Mhm.
Even as a child, it just never really resonated with me. I always thought that it was something bigger. I would rather be outside with my back up against a tree barefoot reading a book or something like that. And it was my reading and my studying and learning more that made me study and learn more about other religions. Like I've studied a little bit of everything. um and in my study of Africa, I'm like, if everything else started in Africa, universities, life itself, all of these things, let me go back to the spiritual systems
Mhm.
because the concept of God had to come from Africa too.
Mhm.
And in college, I really got more in tune. I went to VCU. I would go to a lot of the drum circles, the dancing, the Legba Folklore Society, all these different places. And it kind of led me back to African spirituality. And it took me right to the front door of Ifa. So it's kind of, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Well, that's a beautiful journey, and it's clearly done you well. And I mean, you're somebody who's new to me, I'm new to you, but boy, am I inspired and educated, even in our brief chat today. I hope you don't mind if I bug you sometime in the future for a little bit more wisdom out of you, because I mean, you, you really taught me something today, and I appreciate you for that.
Oh, most definitely. You have my number. You can definitely call me anytime you have questions.
Iya Osunpule. Osun
Osunponmile.
Oh, Osunponmile. I'm so sorry. I apologize to you for that. I'm gonna
It's
learn it. I'm
okay.
gonna tell you. I'm not gonna be so disrespectful in the future to not be able to pronounce your name properly. Thank you so much for your time with us today. Thank you for offering us this small bit of education and for really inspiring me. And I'm sure there's someone on the other end of this camera just as inspired to learn more. I am gonna look for a house and a priest and just see where this can take me because I am fascinated by spirituality and religion and how they're different and how they relate and where they come from. And
Mhm.
I'm on a personal journey myself to find out where I land and all of it. I grew up in the church as well, and not that I've abandoned it, but I'm searching for the rest that I don't yet have. And I appreciate you for helping me with that and for teaching our community and hopefully others about what Juneteenth is as we suddenly find ourselves with a national holiday to learn about.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. This work is definitely important to me. Um, and, just helping people find that connection, even if they don't want to be part of E5, they want to stay in the church or whatever. But understanding that ancestral reverence is not a religion, it has nothing to do with religion, it's a cultural thing to honor. So even if I am able to help someone learn how to honor their ancestors, even if it is just celebrating them on Juneteenth, that is the work. That is important to me.
And I think it bears pointing out, everyone, you, me, everyone, that it's not just African folks who have
Mhm,
ancestors, to
mhm,
pull power from. Maybe there's some tradition from your background that is just as powerful as these are to our guest here. So thank you for that
mhm.
inspiration too. And to those of you at home watching this, you know what I say. Thank you for loving with us. Thank you for listening to us. And thank you for learning from us. Once again, from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, this has been Fridays After 5, presented by Chase. You can see my windows open. It's not quite nighttime yet, but it's going to come when this video comes out. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with me. And I do look forward to learning more about each other.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me and have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Good night.
Good night.